Joshua Miller's car pulled into the community center parking lot on Christmas Eve, his 10-year-old son beside him, when his headlights revealed something that made his heart stop. 3 figures huddled against a brick wall in the freezing cold. What he thought was just shadows turned out to be something far more heartbreaking. A young mother and her twin daughters, 7 years old, trembling, desperate, and starving. "Please," the woman whispered when Josh approached, her voice breaking. "My girls, they haven't eaten in 2 days. I don't know what else to do." What Joshua discovered that night, when he saw that desperate mother trying to shield her freezing daughters from the bitter wind, would lead him down a path of shocking betrayals, hidden fraud, and a truth so stunning it would change all their lives forever. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. "Dad, look!" The words were barely a whisper, but they stopped Joshua Miller's hand mid-reach for the car door handle. His 10-year-old son David was staring out the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass in the freezing December air. Josh followed his son's gaze across the community center parking lot. 3 figures huddled against the brick wall of the adjacent building, a woman and 2 small children, pressed together like they were trying to become one person. Their thin coats were no match for the bitter Ohio wind that whipped through the empty street, carrying tiny crystals of snow that stung like needles. Josh felt something tighten in his chest. Christmas Eve, freezing temperatures, and a mother trying to shield her babies from the cold with nothing but her own body. "Stay in the car for a minute, buddy." He didn't wait for David's response. Josh was already moving, popping the trunk, grabbing the wool blanket he kept for emergencies and the bag of canned goods they'd brought to donate. His worn boots crunched against the icy pavement as he approached slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle them. The woman looked up. Even in the dim glow of the flickering streetlight, Josh could see the wariness in her blue eyes, exhausted, desperate, but still protective. She couldn't have been more than 30, with straight blonde hair that had clearly once been well kept, but now hung limp around her face. The 2 little girls pressed against her sides were identical twins, maybe 7 years old, with matching curly ginger hair and faces pinched with cold and hunger. "I'm sorry to bother you," Josh said gently, stopping a few feet away. He held up the blanket. "I'm Josh. I was just dropping something off at the center, and I thought, well, I have this blanket and some food. Please, take them." Josh turned and waved David over. His son was already out of the car, coat unzipped, before Josh could finish the gesture. David jogged over, and without a word, without being asked, he took off his winter jacket and draped it carefully over the smaller twins' shoulders. "I'm David," he said, his voice gentle in a way that made Josh's throat tighten. "What's your name?" "Me," the little girl stammered through chattering teeth. "And I'm Ava," her sister added quietly. "Come on," David said, reaching out his hand to Mia. "It's really warm inside, and Mr. Frank makes the best hot chocolate." The community center's heating system rattled and hummed, but it worked. That was what mattered. Josh led them through the dimly lit hallway to the common room, where Frank, the elderly night supervisor who knew Josh from his regular donations, was adjusting a space heater in the corner. "Frank, these folks need some warmth and maybe something to eat," Josh said quietly. "Can you help?" Frank looked at Melissa and the twins, and his weathered face softened immediately. He had been working at this community center for 30 years. He'd seen it all. The broken, the desperate, the forgotten, but something about a mother and her children on Christmas Eve hit different. "Of course," he said, his voice gruff but kind. Sit down. I'll be right back."
Melissa sank onto the worn couch like her legs had finally given out. Ava and Mia pressed against her sides, still shivering despite the warmth beginning to seep into their small bodies. Josh wrapped the blanket around all 3 of them, tucking it gently around the twins' shoulders. "Thank you," Melissa whispered again. She kept saying it, like it was the only phrase she remembered. David sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the twins, pulling a quarter from his pocket. "Want to see a magic trick?" he asked, trying to coax a smile from them. Frank returned with a tray, steaming mugs of hot chocolate, thick sandwiches, and a plate of cookies shaped like stars and Christmas trees. Josh watched as Melissa's hands shook when she reached for the food. She handed sandwiches to Ava and Mia first, waiting until they'd taken their first bites before allowing herself even a sip of hot chocolate. The twins ate slowly at first, as if they weren't sure the food was real. Then hunger took over, and they ate with the desperate intensity of children who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Josh moved to a bench across the room with David, giving them space, but staying close enough to help if needed. He studied Melissa as she carefully wiped Mia's face with a napkin, as she whispered encouragement to Ava to drink more hot chocolate, as she made sure her daughters had everything they needed before taking a bite of her own sandwich. A mother, doing what mothers do, putting their children first, even when she was clearly starving herself.
Josh felt memories stirring. 7 years ago, he'd been the one taking care of a child alone, learning on the fly, making mistakes, feeling like he was drowning every single day. David's voice pulled him back to the present. "Dad, can I show them the magic trick you taught me? The one with the disappearing coin?" "Go ahead, buddy." As David entertained the twins, Josh noticed something that made his stomach twist. Melissa was still wearing a wedding ring. Worn, thin, but still there on her left hand. But there was no husband here. No partner helping her keep their children safe and warm. After the twins had eaten and begun to relax, curling together on the couch under the blanket with fuller bellies and warmer bodies, Melissa approached Josh. Up close, under the fluorescent lights, he could see her more clearly. Despite the dirt smudged on her face and the exhaustion carved into every line, she had kind eyes, eyes that had clearly cried too many tears recently. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to do this." Josh shook his head. "Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Melissa's face crumpled for just a moment before she caught herself, holding the tears back through sheer force of will. She glanced at her daughters, making sure they were far enough away not to hear. "My husband," her voice cracked on the word. "6 months ago, he took out a large loan without telling me. Said it was for a business opportunity. Something that would change our lives." She laughed, but it was hollow, broken. "He was right about that part." Josh stayed quiet, letting her find the words. "Then he left. Ran off with a woman he'd been seeing behind my back. Left us with nothing but his debt. The men who came for the money, they took everything. Our house, our car, every penny in our savings account. They didn't care that I didn't sign anything, didn't know about any of it. They just wanted their money." Josh's jaw tightened, his hands curled around the edge of the bench, knuckles going white. "He abandoned his children?" "The shelter we've been staying at is full tonight because of the holiday. We've been waiting outside all evening hoping a spot would open up. But it's Christmas Eve. Everyone needs somewhere to go tonight." She looked at Josh then, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that he recognized. Shame. The kind of shame that comes from feeling like you failed at the one job that matters most.
"I've been applying for jobs everywhere, but no one wants to hire someone with no permanent address. The girls need to be in school, but I can't enroll them without a home. I feel like..." Her voice broke. "I feel like I'm failing them every single day." Josh understood that feeling. He'd carried it like a weight on his chest for years after Catherine died. The crushing responsibility of being the only thing standing between a child and complete devastation. "Do you have any family?" he asked gently. Melissa shook her head. "My parents passed away when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother, but she died 3 years ago. My husband's family..." She swallowed hard.
They blamed me when he left, said I must have driven him away, that I wasn't good enough. That's not true, Josh said firmly. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. You didn't do anything wrong. He did. He's the one who failed, not you. Melissa stared at him, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know what I did wrong, she whispered. I tried to be a good wife. I worked diligently, took care of the girls, kept our home. I don't understand what I did to deserve this.
Josh leaned forward, his voice low and steady. You didn't deserve any of it, and your daughters don't deserve to spend Christmas Eve freezing on the street. Across the room, David was showing the twins another magic trick. Mia giggled, a small, fragile sound, and Ava clapped her hands softly. It was the first time Josh had heard them make any sound of joy. An idea was forming in Josh's mind, probably not logical, definitely risky, but something about this moment felt bigger than logic. Listen, he said, making a decision that would change everything. I have a small house. It's not much, but there's a guest room. You and the girls could stay there, just until you get on your feet. Melissa's eyes went wide. We couldn't impose like that. You don't even know us. I know enough, Josh glanced at her daughters. I know you're a mother trying to protect her children. I know you need help, and I know it's Christmas Eve, and I can't let you go back out into that cold. He paused, and something in his chest loosened, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for 7 years. I'm a single dad too, he said quietly. My wife died 7 years ago. I've been raising David alone since he was 3. It's not easy. There were times when I needed help, when I didn't think I could make it through another day. He met Melissa's eyes. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Let me do the same for you.
Melissa stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. Why would you do this? We're strangers. Josh looked at David, who had both twins laughing now with his silly impressions. His son, who had lost his mother but never lost his kindness, who saw people hurting and wanted to help, because that's what Josh had taught him, even when Josh himself had been drowning in grief. Because it's the right thing to do, Josh said simply, and because nobody should be alone on Christmas. The drive to Josh's house was quiet. Melissa and the twins were crammed into the back seat with their meager belongings, 2 small backpacks containing a few changes of clothes and a worn stuffed owlie rabbit that Ava clutched like a lifeline. David sat in the front, occasionally turning around to whisper something to the twins that made them smile shyly. Josh's mind was racing. What was he thinking? He had a 10-year-old son, a barely their budget, at a house that was already too small for the 2 of them. Now he was bringing home 3 more people? But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Melissa's face in that moment before he'd approached, the way she'd pulled her daughters close, trying to shield them with a body that was already frozen and exhausted. The fierce, desperate love of a parent with nothing left to give except themselves. He knew that feeling.
When Catherine had died, Josh had felt like his entire world had shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. One moment she'd been laughing, playing with 3-year-old David in their backyard. The next moment she was on the ground, her face pale, her lips turning blue. Undiagnosed heart condition, the doctors had said later. A congenital defect, a ticking time bomb hiding in her chest since birth. No warning, no chance to prepare, no opportunity to say goodbye. The first year after her death was a blur. Josh remembered crying in the shower so David wouldn't hear, remembered burning dinner and ordering pizza for the 3rd night in a row, remembered trying to braid David's hair for picture day using a YouTube tutorial, failing miserably, and finally asking the neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, for help. He'd learned to survive on routine. Structure was the only thing that kept the chaos at bay. Wake up at 6 a.m., make breakfast, pack lunches, get David to the school bus, work his shift at the bottling plant, come home, homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories.
even when Josh's eyes were so heavy he could barely keep them open. 7 years of this. 7 years of being both mother and father. 7 years of showing up for every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every school play. 7 years of being enough, even when he felt like he was failing.
And somehow, impossibly, they'd made it work. "We are home," David's voice broke through Josh's thoughts. They were pulling up to the small rental house, a modest 2-bedroom with chipped paint and a front porch that sagged slightly on one side. It wasn't much, but it was home. Melissa stared at the house like it was a mansion. "It's perfect," she whispered. Inside, the house was warm and lived in. Worn furniture, scuffed floors, a Christmas tree in the corner decorated with handmade ornaments David had crafted in elementary school over the years. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive, but it was safe. "The guest room is here," Josh said, leading them down the narrow hallway. The small room had mostly been used for storage, boxes of Catherine's things he couldn't bear to throw away, old tax documents, David's outgrown clothes. "I'll clear out some space tonight. For now, David can sleep on the couch, and you and the girls can take his room." "No, please," Melissa protested. "We can't take his room." But David was already gathering his favorite stuffed animals from his bed. "It's okay. I like camping on the couch, and Ava and Mia need my room more than me tonight." Josh felt his throat tighten with pride. Staring at his son now, he was sure of one thing. He was raising a kind boy. "Is that okay, David?" asked the twins, holding out his stuffed dinosaur to Mia. "You can borrow Rex tonight. He's really good at keeping nightmares away." Mia took the dinosaur carefully, hugging it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered.
Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep in David's bed, their bellies full for the first time in days, their bodies finally warm, Melissa found Josh in the kitchen. He was making tea, because that's what Catherine used to do when she needed to think. It was one of 1,000 small habits he'd kept alive, trying to hold on to pieces of her. "I don't know how to thank you," Melissa said softly. Josh handed her a mug. "You don't have to. Just get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next steps. There's a hiring manager at the bottling plant where I work who owes me a favor, and I know the principal at the elementary school. We can get the girls enrolled." Melissa's hands shook as she held the warm mug. "I'll pay you back. Every cent. As soon as I can work, I'll contribute to groceries, rent, everything. I promise." "Let's just take it one day at a time," Josh said gently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Josh studied Melissa in the soft kitchen light, the tired lines around her eyes, the way she held herself like she was expecting another blow to fall at any moment. "You really raised David alone?" Melissa asked. Josh nodded. "It wasn't easy. Still isn't, but you do what you have to do for your kids." "Your wife, what happened?" Josh felt the familiar ache in his chest, duller now after 7 years, but never fully gone. Heart condition we didn't know about. She was playing with David in the backyard one afternoon. One moment she was laughing, the next she was gone. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. "I'm so sorry," Melissa whispered. "Wait, everything." Josh looked at her directly. "You have your daughters, and from what I've seen tonight, you're an incredible mother. That man was a fool to leave you." Melissa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't look away. "Why are you being so kind to us?" Josh thought about that question. About Catherine's death and the dark year that followed. About Mrs. Henderson bringing casseroles every week. About Frank at the community center letting them use the facilities for free when money was impossibly tight. About all the small kindnesses from strangers that had kept Josh and David afloat when they were drowning. Because people were kind to me when I needed it most. And because kindness matters, especially on Christmas Eve. Melissa looked at him, and something passed between them. A recognition of shared pain, shared struggle, shared strength. They were both wounded, both fighting, both doing everything possible to protect the children who depended on them. "Merry Christmas, Josh," Melissa said softly. "Merry Christmas, Melissa."
Neither of them knew it yet, but something was beginning. Something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. Outside, snow began to fall gently over the small Ohio town, covering the streets in white, making everything clean and new again. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of pancakes and the sound of children's laughter, a sound Josh's house hadn't held in far too long. David had insisted on sharing his new bicycle with the twins, taking turns riding it up and down the hallway while Josh made breakfast. Melissa appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking more rested than the night before, though her eyes were still shadowed with worry. "I can help," she said immediately, moving to the stove. "Please, let me help with something." Josh stepped aside, and they fell into an easy rhythm, him flipping pancakes while she set the table, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, comfortable. Over breakfast, David chattered endlessly about his art set and how he was going to teach Ava and Mia to draw dinosaurs. The twins were quiet, but watchful, occasionally venturing small comments. They were still scared, still uncertain, but they were warming up.
"I need to be honest with you," Melissa said after breakfast, when the children were occupied in the living room. "I don't have much work experience beyond bookkeeping and managing accounts. Before I got married, I ran a small accounting firm, but that was years ago, and after the girls were born, I stayed home." "Can you work with numbers?" Josh asked. "Yes, I'm actually really good with budgets and financial organization." Josh felt something click into place. "Then I know exactly where you need to work. The bottling plant needs someone in their accounting department. Our current person is a disaster. Can't keep anything straight. Let me make a call." The days after Christmas blurred together in a strange, unexpected harmony. Josh called his hiring manager, a gruff man named Bernard, who owed Josh several favors after Josh had covered his shifts during a family emergency. Bernard agreed to interview Melissa. She got the job within the week. Melissa started in the accounting department, and within 2 weeks, she'd reorganized the entire filing system and caught 3 significant errors that had been costing the company money. Bernard pulled Josh aside one day at lunch. "Where did you find her? She's brilliant. Best hire we've made in years." Josh felt pride surge through him. Not the kind of pride you feel for yourself, but the deeper kind you feel when someone you care about succeeds. Wait, care about? Josh pushed the thought away, but it lingered.
Melissa insisted on contributing to household expenses as soon as her first paycheck arrived. Josh tried to refuse, but she was stubborn. "You've already given us everything," she said firmly. "Please let me do this. Let me feel like I'm not just taking." So they worked out an arrangement. She covered groceries, Josh handled rent and utilities. They split the rest. The house began to feel different, fuller. The twins' laughter echoed through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Ava drew pictures that Melissa taped to the refrigerator. Meow sang little songs while coloring at the kitchen table. David thrived having siblings, teaching them games, showing them his favorite books, protecting them like a big brother. Family dinners became routine. Josh would cook while Melissa helped the kids with homework. They'd sit around the small table, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. It felt natural, right. Josh caught himself watching Melissa sometimes. The way she laughed at David's terrible jokes, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on a budget spreadsheet, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. One evening, they were washing dishes together after dinner. Josh washing, Melissa drying. Their hands brushed as she reached for a plate, and Josh felt electricity shoot up his arm. Melissa felt it too. He could tell by the way she froze, her breath catching. "Sorry," Josh mumbled. "It's okay," she said quietly. But the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither was quite ready to name.
2 months passed. Spring was beginning to push away winter's grip. Melissa and the twins had become permanent fixtures in Josh's life, in his home, in his routine, in his heart. One Saturday afternoon, Melissa was in the guest room organizing old paperwork, trying to rebuild her credit and make sense of the financial disaster her ex-husband had left behind. Josh was in the kitchen when he heard her sharp intake of breath. "Josh?" Her voice was strange. "Josh, I need to show you something." He found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by old documents, her hands trembling as she held a bank statement.
"What is it?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "The loan," she said, her voice shaking. "The loan my husband supposedly took out. Josh, look at this signature." She showed him the document. The signature was clearly forged. The handwriting didn't match any of Melissa's other signatures on legitimate documents. "He faked it," she whispered. "He committed fraud. I was never legally responsible for any of this debt." Josh's mind raced. The men who took your house, your savings? They weren't legitimate loan sharks. They were probably his friends, helping to cover his tracks, making it look real so he could take the money and run. Melissa's voice was growing stronger, anger replacing shock. "I have old text messages, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. I know where he is now. He's living 2 towns over. I saw it on social media before I had to sell my phone."
Josh grabbed her shoulders gently. "We're going to fix this. But Melissa, this isn't just about money. This is fraud. I don't want lawyers and courts," Melissa interrupted, her eyes fierce. "I want to look him in the face. I want him to know I figured it out, and I want what he stole from my daughters." Josh saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Strength. Raw, powerful, unbreakable strength. "Then let's go. But I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." The drive took 40 minutes. Melissa had found her ex-husband's address through an old mutual friend who didn't know the whole story. The apartment building was run down, paint peeling, the kind of place people ended up when they were running from something. Josh parked across the street. "Are you sure about this?" Melissa nodded. "I'm sure." They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Melissa knocked, firm, steady, unafraid. The man who answered the door looked nothing like Josh had imagined. Average height, thinning hair, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. He looked at Melissa and his face went pale. "Melissa, how did you—"
"I know everything, Trevor," Melissa said, her voice cold and controlled. "The fake loan, the forged signature, your friends pretending to be collectors, the gambling debts you covered up by destroying your family." Trevor's mouth opened and closed like fish. I don't know what you're talking about." Melissa pulled out her folder of documents. "I have bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, text messages you forgot to delete, records of your gambling activity, and I have witnesses who will testify that you bragged about your plan." It was a bluff. She didn't have witnesses, but Trevor didn't know that. His face crumbled. "Melissa, please, I was desperate. The gambling got out of control and You destroyed your children's lives to cover your mistakes," Melissa said, her voice shaking now with barely controlled rage. "You made them homeless. You made them cold and hungry and scared. On Christmas Eve, Trevor. Your daughters were begging for food on Christmas Eve while you were living in this apartment, safe and warm." Trevor's eyes filled with tears, but they were selfish tears, tears of guilt and shame, not genuine remorse. Josh stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "You're going to return every penny you stole. Whatever you have left, you're giving it back." "I don't have it all," Trevor whimpered. "I lost most of it gambling."
"Then you'll give what you have," Melissa said firmly, "and you'll sign a legal document admitting to the fraud. Because if you don't, I'm taking everything I have to every person you know. Your family, your employer, your friends. I'll make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of man you are." Trevor looked between them. This woman he'd betrayed, and this stranger who stood beside her like a shield. He saw that he had no choice. "Fine," he whispered. I'll get what I have." They left the apartment 20 minutes later with a bank check for $30,000, not everything Trevor had stolen, but enough. And they had a signed confession, properly witnessed by a neighbor Trevor had called over. In the car, Melissa sat silently, staring at the check in her hands. Then, suddenly, she started laughing. Not the hollow laugh from before, but real laughter,
deep and cathartic and free. "I can't believe that worked," she gasped between laughs. Josh found himself laughing too. "You were incredible in there. Fierce, powerful. I've never seen anything like it." Melissa's laughter faded, and she turned to look at Josh. Really look at him. "I couldn't have done it without you. Knowing you were there, that I wasn't alone." Josh pulled the car over to the side of the road, his heart pounding. "Melissa, I need to tell you something." "What is it?"
"The truth that stunned me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It wasn't about the fraud or the money or what your ex-husband did. Then what was it? It was watching you stand there in that apartment, strong and fearless and brilliant. It was realizing I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe months." Josh reached for her hand. "It was understanding that I didn't save you. You saved yourself. But I also realized something else." "What?" Melissa whispered. "I need you. Not because you need saving, but because you make my life better. You make David's life better. You make our house feel like a home again." He took a shaky breath. "I don't want you to get your own place with that money. I want you to stay. I want us to be a family, a real family." Tears streamed down Melissa's face. "Josh, You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that what started as kindness on Christmas Eve became something else. Something real." Melissa leaned across the console and kissed him. It was tentative at first, then deeper, filled with all the emotion they'd both been holding back for months. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "I love you too," Melissa whispered. "I've loved you since that night you made me tea and told me I wasn't failing my daughters, since you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something." "You're worth everything," Josh said fiercely. "Sometimes the person you need walks into your life exactly when you need them most."
2 years later, the community center was decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights. Josh stood at the front of the room, wearing a suit David had helped him pick out. His son stood beside him as best man, grinning widely. Frank, the elderly night supervisor who'd helped them that first night, stood in front of them, holding a small book. "Dearly beloved," he began, his gruff voice surprisingly tender. The doors at the back opened, and Melissa walked in. She wore a simple white dress, her blonde hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Ava and Mia walked ahead of her as flower girls, scattering petals and giggling softly. Josh's breath caught. She was beautiful, not just on the outside, but in all the ways that mattered, in her strength, her kindness, her resilience, her love. When Melissa reached him, she took his hands, and Josh saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "We're here today," Frank continued, "to celebrate the joining of two families who found each other when they needed it most, to celebrate the love that grew from kindness, to celebrate second chances and new beginnings." Josh barely heard the rest of the ceremony. He was lost in Melissa's eyes, in the weight of this moment, in the knowledge that somehow, against all odds, they'd found their way to each other.
"I do," he said when prompted, his voice strong and certain. "I do," Melissa echoed, tears streaming down her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Josh pulled Melissa close and kissed her, as David, Ava, and Mia cheered. The small gathering of friends and co-workers applauded. Frank wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. That night, at their wedding reception, held in the same community center where they'd first met, Josh stood to give a toast. David handed him a glass, and Josh looked around at all the faces he loved. 2 years ago, he began, I thought I was just helping a stranger on Christmas Eve. I thought I was just doing the right thing, offering warmth and food and shelter to a mother and her children who needed it. He looked at Melissa, who was watching him with such love it made his chest ache. But the truth that stunned me wasn't about fraud or money or even justice. The truth was that the moment I saw Melissa protecting her daughters, I recognized something in her.
I recognized myself. I recognized strength and love and determination. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. The truth was that in trying to help her, she helped me. She brought light back into a house that had been dark for too long. She gave David siblings. She gave me a reason to believe in love again.
Josh raised his glass. The truth that stunned me was that sometimes broken things can be made more beautiful than they were before. That love finds you when you're busy being kind. That family isn't always about blood. It's about showing up day after day for the people who matter. Everyone raised their glasses. To Melissa, Josh said, to second chances, to finding home in the most unexpected places. To family, Melissa added softly. To family, everyone echoed. As the party continued around them, Josh pulled Melissa close, swaying gently to the music. David was teaching Ava and Mia how to do a silly dance, and their laughter filled the room. "Thank you," Melissa whispered against Josh's chest. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for giving us a home when we had nowhere to go, for loving my daughters like they're your own." Josh tilted her chin up so he could see her face. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger, for letting me into your life, for making our family complete." They kissed softly as snow began to fall outside, just like it had that first Christmas Eve. Josh thought about that night 2 years ago. About the 3 figures huddled against the cold, about the decision to offer help instead of looking away, about how one small act of kindness had transformed into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Sometimes the greatest miracles come from the simplest choices. Sometimes saving someone else is exactly how you save yourself. And sometimes, on a frozen Christmas Eve, when you open your heart to a stranger, you find exactly what you've been missing all along. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you of the power we all have to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, please don't just watch and walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join our Soul Lift Stories family for more stories that restore your faith in humanity. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted.